Welcome to episode 11, when counselling is unlikely to help. You ever been in a foreign country where you don't speak the language and you've asked someone to help you with directions and then looking at you dumbfounded because they themselves are also foreigners in that land and you both trying to interact with each other but you can't? I'm sure you can imagine the scenario that I'm describing. Well, this is somewhat what this episode is going to entail when counseling is unlikely to help. Counseling is often presented as something that helps whenever a person is struggling. That idea is appealing, but it is not accurate. Counseling is not equally helpful at all times, and understanding when it is likely to help is essential for using it well. One situation where counseling is unlikely to help is when there is no capacity to reflect. Counseling depends on some ability to notice internal experiences. If someone is in acute crisis, extreme distress, or immediate danger, stabilization comes first. In those moments, practical support, medical intervention, or crisis services are more appropriate than exploratory work. Counseling is not designed to replace those forms of care. Another situation where counseling struggles to help is when attendance is driven entirely by external pressure. I used to have some students in a secondary school who would come to me for therapy, and a lot of them would come because parents were forcing them to come, or the teachers or members of staff were forcing them to come to the therapy sessions. And in those situations, they weren't getting the full benefits of the therapy or the interaction. If someone is attending because they've been told to, rather than because they see any relevance themselves, engagement is very limited. This does not mean they must feel motivated or hopeful, but there needs to be at least some personal reason to be there. Without that, counseling becomes very performative rather than participatory. Counseling is also unlikely to help when it is being used to avoid action. Sometimes people attend counseling while postponing decisions they already know they need to make. So what decision do you know you need to act on that you're not acting on? That goes out to you, by the way. Sessions become a holding space that delays change rather than supporting it. In these cases, counseling can unintentionally maintain the problem, amplifying it on and on. When counseling becomes a substitute for action rather than a context for understanding action, progress stalls. Another timing issue arises when counseling is used to seek relief without tolerance. If the primary aim is to feel better as quickly as possible, counseling will often feel very frustrating. Early stages of counseling tend to increase awareness before comfort. When discomfort cannot be tolerated at all, sessions may be abandoned prematurely or reduced to reassurance. Counseling requires some willingness to experience difficulty without immediate resolution, like delayed gratification or delayed response or delayed answers. There are also situations where counseling is unlikely to help because expectations are misaligned. If someone expects advice, certainty, or solutions, counseling may be ineffective. This is not a failure of counseling, but a mismatch of purpose. Without adjustment of expectations, the work cannot function as intended. Counseling can also be poorly timed when practical instability dominates. Housing insecurity, active substance misuse, ongoing violence, or unmanaged physical illness can limit the usefulness of counseling. In these contexts, practical and structural interventions often need to come first. Counseling may still play a role later, but not as the primary focus. Another important consideration is readiness for change. This does not mean being prepared to transform or resolve anything. It means being able to tolerate some uncertainty in self-examination. When someone is completely unwilling or unable to question familiar patterns, counseling tends to circle without movement. Finally, counseling is unlikely to help when it is treated as indefinite without review. If sessions continue without shifts in awareness, engagement, or focus, timing needs to be reconsidered. Counselling is not meant to continue by default. Review is part of responsible use. Recognizing when counselling is unlikely to help is not a judgment, it is a practical assessment. Used at the right time, counselling can be very effective and meaningful. But when used at the wrong time, ooh, no. It can feel confusing or even disappointing. Knowing the difference protects both the person seeking help and the process itself. That's the scope of this episode, and each episode focuses on one specific element each time, and this was it. We'll leave it there for now and move on in the next episode.